It's a cold morning. You start it up, and because somebody taught you this a long time ago, you let it sit and idle in the driveway for 5 minutes to warm up before you touch the gas. You baby it. You keep the revs low to save fuel. You use the good gas when you remember. You shut it off gently the second you pull into the garage. Everything you do carefully, because you want this thing to last. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Half of what you just did in that little morning routine is quietly wearing the engine out. That's the strange thing about killing a modern engine. It almost never happens the way you picture it. It isn't the guy doing burnouts at the light. Most of the time, it's the careful driver, the responsible one, doing things that felt like plain good sense, on an engine that no longer works the way the engines those old rules were written for used to work. I've had the covers off enough of these little turbo 4s and direct injected 6s to tell you a short trip city engine from a highway engine the moment I see the inside of one. The sludge sits at a certain line. The back of the intake valves looks like the inside of a chimney, and 9 times out of 10, the owner swears they took good care of it. They did. They just took good care of it by the old rules. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to walk you through 7 ordinary driving habits that are hard on a modern SUV engine, why each one specifically bites the way these things are built now, and exactly what to do instead. Most of the fixes cost you nothing. And the one almost everybody gets wrong is number 2. The thing your dad probably told you to do every winter morning. Stay with me for that one especially. Before the list, let me show you what's really going on, because it ties all 7 of these together. 30 years ago, the engine in a big family hauler was usually a large, lazy, naturally breathing lump. Cast iron, low compression, turning slow, built with room to spare in every direction. You could treat one of those badly for years, and it would shrug it off because the people who built it left an enormous margin between what it could take and what you'd ever ask of it. The engine in a new SUV is a different animal. To hit the fuel economy numbers, the rules now demand. They shrank it, then bolted a turbocharger on to claw the power back, and they squirt the fuel straight into the cylinder at very high pressure to make it all work. It makes more power out of less metal than anything the old-timers would have believed. But that margin, that big comfortable cushion between what it can take and what you ask of it, they spent most of it just to get here. So the modern engine runs hotter, tighter, and under more pressure, and it has far less patience for the sloppy stuff. The habits didn't get worse. The engines got thin-skinned. Keep that in your head for all 7. Habit number 1, and it's the one hiding in plain sight. The short trip. The 2 miles to the shops, the school run, the quick errand, engine off again before it ever really woke up. Here's the problem. Your oil doesn't do its best work until it's hot, and hot means around 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 Celsius, and held there for a while. It takes 10, maybe 15 minutes of actual driving to get there. On a 2-mile hop, you never come close. And that matters for a reason most people never think about. Every time fuel burns in the cylinder, it makes a little water, that's just chemistry, and a little unburned fuel sneaks past the piston rings down into the oil. When the engine gets properly hot, that water and that fuel boil off and get carried out. When it doesn't, they stay. They sit in your oil. Do that every single day, and the water and the fuel and the combustion gunk stir together into acid and sludge. The acid eats at your bearings and your camshaft. The fuel thins the oil out until it can't hold its film where the metal needs it most. Meanwhile, your catalytic converter, that expensive thing in your exhaust, only starts doing its job once it's good and hot, and on short hops it never gets there either, so it just slowly clogs and corrodes from the inside. The old iron block tolerated all this because it was loose and forgiving to begin with. Your tight modern engine, with its thin oil and its converter tucked right up against it, takes it a lot harder. The fix costs nothing. Once a week, give it a proper long run, 20-30 minutes on the open road, and let everything get hot enough to cook that moisture and fuel back out. And if short hops are simply your life, if you work from home and the car never really gets to stretch its legs, then change your oil on time and not just on the mileage, because that oil is aging from the water and fuel sitting in it whether or not the odometer is moving. On a car that lives that way, treat time itself as the trigger, and don't wait for a number of miles that may never come. Think of it as letting the engine take one full deep breath after a week of short, shallow ones. Habit number 2, the one I told you to wait for. This is the cold morning routine, and there are two halves to it, and both are wrong. First half. You start it and let it sit and idle to warm up. I know. Your dad did it. His dad did it. And on an old carbureted engine, it made real sense because those things ran badly when cold and needed the coaxing. Yours does not. The computer sorts the fuel out the instant it fires. And here's the kicker. An engine sitting at idle barely makes any heat at all, so it warms up painfully slowly, and while it's sitting there cold, it's running rich, washing raw fuel down the cylinders and dribbling it into your oil, and building carbon on the valves the whole time. You are not warming it up, you're just marinating it. Second half, and this is the one that actually does the damage. Because you feel like you waited, you pull out and get straight on the gas while it's still stone cold. When the engine is cold, the oil is thick and slow and hasn't fully reached the top end yet, and the internal clearances aren't where they want to be. Loading it hard right then grinds metal that just isn't ready for it. On a turbo engine, it's worse, and there's a specific nasty thing that cold and low revs bring on together, which I'll get to in just a minute. So what do you actually do? It's simple, and it's faster anyway. Start it. Give it maybe 30 seconds for the oil to get moving, then just drive, gently. No hard throttle, keep the revs sensible until the temperature needle comes up off the bottom. Driving it easy warms it far quicker than idling ever will, because now it's actually working, just not straining. The old engines forgave the cold. The new ones want that easy warm-up more than any engine before them, and they'll pay you back in miles for giving it to them. Habit number 3, and this is where I keep that promise. Lugging it. That's when you're in too high a gear for what you're asking, low revs, and you push down hard to climb a hill or pull away, and instead of dropping a gear, the engine just bogs and grunts and hauls itself along at 1500 RPM under a heavy foot. People do it on purpose, thinking low revs must be saving fuel. Here's why it hurts. All that force from the burn has to go somewhere, and at low revs it slams into the pistons, the rods, and the bearings while everything is moving slowly and awkwardly. Down there, the burn does most of its shoving in one narrow part of the stroke, at an angle where the rod isn't set up to take it well, so it lands more like a hammer blow than a smooth push right on a piston that's barely moving. The connecting rod bearings take the worst of it. Push hard enough for long enough, and the film of oil that's supposed to keep metal off metal gets squeezed too thin, and that is how bearings start to go. And because the burn is lazy and incomplete down there, you cake carbon onto the valves and rings on top of everything else. Rule of thumb, if it's pulling smoothly, you're just working it, which is fine. If it's shuddering and groaning, you're lugging it, and it wants a lower gear. Now here's the part that's special to your modern turbo, and it even has a name. Low-speed pre-ignition. Because these little engines are built to make big torquey way down low, that exact low-rev heavy-load moment can make the fuel and a stray droplet of oil light off on their own, before the spark plug ever fires. That's a small bomb going off against a piston that is still coming up to meet it. It can crack a piston or snap a ring land in one single hit. This isn't shop scaremongering either. It's real enough that the oil companies had to rewrite their formulas to fight it, which is exactly why using the current oil specification for your engine genuinely matters here. So don't lug a turbo. When you want to pull, let it spin up a bit first, then ask. Habit number 4 is about how you stop, not how you go, and it really only matters if you've got a turbo, which on a new SUV you very likely do. You've been working it, up a long grade, towing, or just a hard run on the highway, you pull in and you shut it off the very second you're parked. Think about what that turbo just did. It's a tiny wheel on a shaft spinning somewhere north of 150,000 RPM, and the exhaust side of it glows. We're talking metal up around 800 or 900 degrees. That whole spinning assembly is fed and cooled by a thin thread of engine oil running through its center. Now you switch the engine off. The oil pump stops dead, but all that heat is still sitting right there, soaking into the bearing, and the oil that's trapped in there with nowhere to go and no flow to carry it away gets baked. It turns into a hard, gritty carbon, and mechanics have a word for it: coking. Do it enough times and that grit chews up the bearing, the shaft develops play, and a turbo is not a cheap thing to replace. Cooked oil in there can cut the life of that bearing by more than half. Now, I'll be straight with you, because a lot of the internet won't be. Most modern turbos are water-cooled through the center now, and for gentle everyday driving, they handle this just fine. You do not need to sit there idling after a run to the shops. But after you've genuinely worked it, towing or a hard run on the highway, those 30 to 60 seconds of idle before you cut it off still earn their keep. Better yet, ease off for the last minute of driving so it comes down cool with the oil still flowing through it. The old naturally breathing engines had none of this to think about. That's the trade for the free power a turbo hands you. It costs you a few seconds built into how you park after a hard run, and that's the whole difference between a turbo that lasts the life of the car and one that quietly lets go early. A little bit of manners on shutdown. Habit number 5 isn't really a driving style, it's a decision, and it's the most expensive one on this whole list. The check engine light comes on, the engine feels a little rough, maybe a shake at idle, but it still drives, so you just keep driving it. Weeks go by. You mean to get to it. Here's what's happening while you wait. A misfire means one cylinder isn't lighting its fuel properly, so a full slug of raw, unburned fuel gets shoved out into the exhaust every cycle. That raw fuel hits your catalytic converter and lights off inside it, where fuel was never meant to burn, and the temperature in there spikes way past what the ceramic honeycomb can survive. It melts, it cracks, it falls to pieces. And on most modern engines, that converter is bolted right up tight against the engine, so now you've turned a small ignition fault into a converter. And depending on the vehicle, that's anywhere from about $900 to $3,000 or $4,000 to put right, more than that on a lot of turbo SUVs. And it isn't only the converter. That raw fuel washes the oil right off the cylinder wall, so the piston and rings are scraping dry, scoring the bore, and the good cylinders working next to the dead one are pulling overtime and running hot. Now you're into real internal engine damage. Here is the one thing to burn into your memory. If that check engine light is flashing, not steady flashing, that specifically means a misfire, bad enough to be destroying your converter right now as you drive. Flashing light, get off the throttle, take it easy, and get it looked at today, not next week. A steady light soon. And here's the small mercy in it. Caught early, most misfires are something cheap and simple. A tired ignition coil, a fouled spark plug, a little cracked vacuum hose, a clogged injector, the kind of thing a decent shop finds and sorts in about an hour. The car that once just needed a $40 ignition coil or a fresh set of spark plugs will happily eat $2,000 if you keep driving it deaf to what it's trying to tell you. Habit number 6, and this one I have to be careful and honest about because there is a lot of nonsense talked about it. Your SUV calls for premium fuel, and you've been filling it with regular to save a few dollars a tank. First, the honest part. If your owner's manual says premium is only recommended, you are mostly fine on regular. And every modern engine has a knock sensor, a little ear bolted to the block that listens for detonation, and the moment it hears trouble, it tells the computer to pull the ignition timing back and protect itself. So you are not going to blow the engine up on the next tank. Anybody who tells you that is selling you something. Here's the but, and it's a real but, especially if your manual says premium is required, which a lot of turbo SUVs do. When you feed a high-compression, boosted engine a fuel that can't handle the pressure, that knock sensor ends up pulling timing constantly, and now the engine is running its whole life backed off from where it was actually designed to run. You lose power, you lose the fuel economy you were chasing in the first place, so half your saving is a mirage, and it runs hotter and cakes on more carbon over the years. Worse, that sensor has its limits. On a brutal hot day, loaded up, climbing a long grade, the engine can slip into genuine detonation faster than the computer can fully catch it, and detonation is a hammer beating on your pistons and your bearings. The old low-compression engines truly did not care what you fed them. A modern boosted one does. If premium is only recommended, that's your call. If it's required, just buy the fuel it asks for. It's a lot cheaper than what's waiting on the other side of ignoring it. Habit number 7, and it's the one an SUV practically dares you to do, because the thing looks like it could haul the world, so you load it right to the roof, hitch up a trailer that's sitting at the edge of what's allowed or a little past it, throw a loaded box up top, and point the whole lot at a mountain pass in the middle of summer. The enemy here is heat. Under a big sustained load, your engine oil, your coolant, and your transmission fluid all climb toward temperatures they don't like one bit. Hot oil goes thin and stops protecting the way it should. Coolant creeps toward boiling. And the transmission, which on a lot of these is the very first thing to cry, cooks its fluid until it breaks down and quits doing its job. And a transmission is often the single most expensive thing under the whole vehicle. Push a heavily loaded engine hard on a hot day, and you also nudge it toward that same detonation we just talked about, because heat and load together are exactly what brings it on. And here's the quiet catch that's specific to modern SUVs. A lot of what gets sold as a rugged, do-anything family truck is really a car underneath, built light, with just enough cooling for a normal life, not for dragging a loaded trailer over a pass in July. The old body-on-frame haulers were overbuilt for precisely this kind of work. A great many of today's are simply not, whatever the advert showed you. So know your real tow and load numbers, the ones printed in the manual, not the ones in your optimism. Stay under them. On a long, hot climb, back off, drop a gear so the engine spins up in its happy range instead of straining down low, keep an eye on your temperatures, and give it a breather if it's really climbing. If you tow often, it's well worth asking about a proper transmission cooler, because that fluid is usually the first thing to surrender under heat. And coming back down the far side of the pass, use the engine and the gears to hold your speed instead of riding the brakes the whole way down, so you're not cooking those into fade right when you need them most. The machine will tell you it's unhappy long before it breaks if you're paying it any attention. Now let me pull back for a second, because this is the part that actually matters, and it's the thread running underneath all seven. Notice what every one of these fixes costs. Take a longer drive once a week. Warm it up by driving gently instead of standing there idling. Drop a gear instead of lugging it. Wait 30 seconds before you kill a hot turbo. Fix a misfire the day the light comes on. Put in the fuel it asks for. Stay under your tow rating. Every single one of those is free, or close enough to free that it makes no difference. Almost none of it needs a shop at all. It's just knowing how the machine wants to be treated and then treating it that way. So why does it feel like nobody ever sat you down and told you any of this? I'll be straight with you about how I see it. There is no money in an engine that forgives you. There is a great deal of money in one that doesn't. Think about who's standing around the moment your modern engine punishes a small mistake. The parts maker sells you the converter, the turbo, the whole assembly, at a price that used to buy a whole running car. The dealer sells you the hours to fit it, and half these jobs are buried so deep in the engine bay that only the dealer can even reach them because these things were never designed to be worked on in your own driveway. And the whole long march towards smaller, hotter, sealed up and more complicated, all of it got sold to us as progress, as efficiency, and some of it honestly is. But it quietly did something else too. It moved the repair from a $40 part you fit yourself on a Saturday morning to a four-figure job you've got no choice but to pay somebody else for. I don't believe there's a secret meeting somewhere where men in suits sit and plot how to wear your engine out. It's simpler than that and honestly a bit worse. It's just 1,000 small decisions that all happen to lean the same direction, because the fragile, complicated, sealed-up version is the one that turns out to be profitable. Nobody makes $1 teaching you to drop a gear on a hill. Everybody down that chain makes $1 when you don't know to, and it lets go, and you're standing at a service counter reading an estimate with a number on it you would have laughed out loud at 10 years ago. The habits are free. The not knowing is what's expensive, and it's expensive on purpose. There's something else buried in all this, though, past the money, and it's the part I actually care about the most. When you understand how your machine wants to be treated, something shifts in you. You stop being a passenger in your own car. You start to hear it. You feel it bogging on a grade and you drop a gear without even thinking about it. You catch the note change when it's cold and you go easy on it. You notice the light the day it comes on, not 3 weeks later. That's not mechanical genius, it's just attention. The same plain attention the old mechanics had because they had no choice. Because back then, a car was a thing you were expected to understand and look after, not a sealed appliance you just used until it threw a code and gave up. That's the real thing that gets quietly taken from you when everything becomes a box you're not allowed to open. Not just the money, the knowing. the quiet competence of understanding the machine you lean on every single day, and the plain, deep satisfaction of a thing that lasts because you treated it right and because somebody once built it to be understood. You can hold on to that. It's mostly just choosing to pay attention. And an engine treated with a little of that attention will outlast one that's babied by all the wrong rules, every single time. So here's what I want you to take away. Laid out plain. 1. Short trips are quietly poisoning your oil, so once a week give it a proper long run and let it get fully hot. 2. Don't idle to warm it up. That does nothing good, just start it. Wait half a minute and drive gently until the needle rises. 3. Don't lug it in too high a gear under load. If it's shuddering, drop a gear and never ever lug a turbo. 4. If you've been working a turbo hard, let it idle 30 seconds or ease right off before you shut it down. 5. A check engine light is not a suggestion, and a flashing one means stop straining it and deal with it today. 6. If your engine requires premium, feed it premium. 7. Know your real load and tow numbers and stay under them, and back off on long hot climbs. None of that costs a thing. Add it all up, and the price of doing every one of the 7 right is basically zero. A little attention and maybe one longer drive a week. The price of getting them wrong is a converter, a turbo, a transmission, an engine, 4-figure numbers that all show up at once when you least expect them. And picture where this puts you a year from now. You're the one whose SUV still pulls clean and strong while the same model parked down the street is coughing on its second converter. You hear the engine start to bog on a grade and your hand is already moving to the shifter. The light comes on and you know roughly what it's telling you before anyone's even plugged in a scanner. You're not at anybody's mercy, and you're not overpaying out of simply not knowing. That's what all of this buys you, and it barely costs you anything but the habit of paying attention. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me down in the comments which of these 7 you've been guilty of, because I'll happily admit I let engines sit and idle to warm up for years before I knew any better. And I especially want to hear from the people who've actually had one of these bite them, or who fixed one that had, what the vehicle was, what it cost you, what you wish somebody had told you sooner, and tell me where you're driving them to, because the mountain passes and the cold mornings change all of this. I read every one of these, and honestly the stories you all leave are half the reason I keep making them. If this was useful to you, subscribe and stick around, because next time I want to open up one of the biggest quiet ones of them all, the lifetime transmission fluid. The stuff they seal inside and swear to you that you'll never once have to change. I've drained that so-called lifetime fluid at 80,000 miles, and it comes out black and burnt and smelling like it gave up a long time ago. And there is a very particular reason they'd rather you didn't know it has a drain plug on it at all. That one just might change the way you look at the word lifetime for good. Until then, do the easy things, listen to the machine, and stop taking such good care of it by all the wrong rules. It'll thank you with a lot more years than it was ever supposed to give you. I'll see you next time.